All right, in this section, we're going to talk about laying more texture down, but using textures to create the illusion of creases, wrinkles in our lips. We'll also be talking about how to enhance the skin to make it look more wet. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's continue to lay down our textures. I'm just going to use my loaded library version. I have a bunch of textures that we put in from earlier. So here is just a basic texture that I created from a Komodo dragon. And you can use a snake, or you can use anything with those folds or that type of scale. So it's up to you on that. But we're going to use the same technique, but we're just going to start to multiply and build on the textures we've already laid down. So we're going to use the warp tool and continue to pull and stretch. Now, artistically, some cues you want to make sure that you're looking out for. You want to make sure that your skin, the cells, or the skin is flowing properly, that it looks like it belongs in the places that it is. So you want to zoom in and take a step back and say, would it go in this direction? Does it make sense? So even if you're creatively working on it, ultimately you want to make sure that it visually makes sense. And don't take the cop out and say, oh, well, this is just the way I want to do it. There's still rhyme and reason to everything within nature. And we want to keep that in our work. So same technique, turning the layers down. I'm going to continue to clean it up. And I want to show you guys every step that I take in the process. So a lot of it is repetitive, but I want you to see that this is what I would do to create an image, the image that we're going to get at the end of the tutorial. Now, at any point, you can always fast forward a little bit and say, okay, I see how he's laying down the layers, but if you're interested in watching every single step, well, here we go, every single step for the most part. So, to clean up the edges, make sure the further something is away, the harder it is to see. We're going to do the same technique we did before, where the ridges are going to have a little more texture than the inside, the crevices or the canvas, where the canvas drops. So just clean it out, erasing, push and pull, push and pull. And we're doing all right. This is looking pretty good. And it's blending well with the other textures. So I'm happy with that. Take a step back and look at it. It looks good. Let's go ahead and drop another texture. And it's so good to have a library, because then you have a lot of choices that you can pick from. So we'll use the same one. And I'm going to do the same thing. Just put a generic rotation on. Make sure that it makes sense to the opposite side. So we're doing pretty much the same thing on the other side, except we're going to warp it generically. And then we'll adjust it to make sure that it fits the shape. And I'm going to overlay the elephant skin that we put down earlier. Just make a new layer symbol. We're going to make a smart object, not a symbol, a smart object, and add a mask. And we're going to do the same thing. Let's just clean up the edges here. Erase. And while I'm working, while I'm just following the procedures, I want to make sure that I'm using my critical eye to say, visually, do I feel like this makes sense? Or is it a stretch? Is it, because you can also just throw textures down that don't fit what it is you're doing. And the textures don't solve the problem of bad art. Textures are there to support good art and to push your image a little bit further. So you want to make sure that visually, does it make sense? Does it flow well together? Is it cohesive? And that becomes the main issue. So now I want to add a little bit of a highlight, something like a wet skin. So we want to deal with another layer of skin. And on this creature, I foresee him as having a little bit of, I don't want to say slimy, but I don't want his skin to be so dry and scaly like the bottom part is. So we're going to add a couple things throughout. So I'm going to use the puppet warp tool this time. And we're going to use that to give me a little bit, give me more control. So with the portrait warp, we just go ahead and place the pins and stretch it out. And it gives me the ability to stretch that texture directly. And I can make it, force it to fit the form of the actual face. We'll go back and we'll make this an overlay. Or let's see if something else will work in this case. The lighting looks pretty good. And like I said earlier, most of the time I'm going to use an overlay, but every now and then I'll find another option that really works for me. So this, I don't think overlay works as well. So I'm just going through my options. And I'm going to find out which one do I think is really going to give me the look that I'm trying to achieve. Let's zoom in a little bit. Here we go. So color dodge looks like it's working. So we're going to go ahead and throw a mask on and just erase the hard edges out so that it looks like it blends. And I'm going to use that to create the illusion of depth once again. We still have a little bit of the scatter on the brush, which is good. It gives me a non-uniform erase so it doesn't look generic and I don't have to work as hard. And then go into the crevices a little bit and clean that up too. There we go. And now we take the airbrush, give it a little bit more. And so the parts that are further away, they get less highlights, right? So I want to go in and erase and hollow that out. And that gives us the illusion of having more than one flat surface. It gives us the ability to look at it as grooves. So let's go ahead and move this over. Control T. Just hit Control T and flip it horizontally. And we're going to place that edge there. There we go. So I notice here that my image was, when I hit Control T to make it into a transformable object, you notice that it took up pretty much the whole screen. Well, what happens normally there is, at some point I took my brush and I may have touched my palette, and it keeps that as a part of the image. So I could stop and figure it out and clean it up, but I don't really have to, because later on we're going to use a mask to cut out anything that we don't want to use. So you can see there's little green highlights that go off of the creature and onto the canvas. We'll take care of all of that collectively. So I grabbed the elephant skin again, and now I want to use it for the mouth. We're going to use that to add texture to the mouth. Let's get this guy to move over. Let's see. We have everything selected. There we go. Okay. And let's scale it down. Now, there's a couple ways that we could do this. We could actually just paint the crevices on the lips, but this is just far more efficient, and it gives me such a unique and nice pattern. Let's see. Just thinking about which direction is going to work. So let's just warp it to have it follow the shape of the mouth. And I'm going to take some of this into the nose too. So let's put it right about there. And bring it down a little bit more. Pull the levers and stretch it out. There we go. I think this is a good shape. Getting pretty close to what I need. And I'll have to bring another layer in too to help support whatever I do here. So take the opacity down, throw another mask on, and we're going to erase away whatever else we don't want to use. Turn this up a little bit more, and then zoom in. So I want to clear off the teeth and anything underneath. There we go. And so it looks pretty bad now, but when we make a few adjustments to it, it'll make a little more sense. Get a good shape, good form. There we go. The one lip looks a little too high, but we'll see later on as I move on if I can use it or not. Bring this back up. That gives us a better balance. Take this into the nose area slightly. And just make sure everything else is cleaned up. And then I want to break up the texture and bring in the actual painting that I have underneath. So this way it stops it from feeling like, oh, just a texture that's thrown on top. Now in the next video, what we'll do is we'll continue to add a little bit more of a wet texture to our creature because it feels a little too dry. So when we come back, we'll continue to add wet textures.